All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. We got Chris Brown. He's a giant grower. He's really good with giant tomatoes. He has one at 9.06 pounds. He's got, I think, a couple state records for the giant sunflowers. And so we're going to talk about both of those tonight. And we're going to bring him on. And it's a really, really good pleasure to have him on. So let's bring Chris on now. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
How's it going? How's it going, all you
It's doing
giant
good.
growers out there? It's it's the end of January, last day in January. Up here, we're barely struggling to get to 0 degrees, and we have a couple feet of snow on the ground. I hail from Minnesota, right at the top of the United States. For all those watching around the world, and I'm really excited to be with you guys tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you, and I really appreciate you coming on. Let's kind of, while we wait for people to come in, let's kind of talk about your journey in giant growing. Like, how did you get into giant growing?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I started gardening around 7 years old, and that was due in pretty much large part to my grandfather, who was a smaller farmer, had about 8 acres. That he would grow stuff and then bring it not door to door to sell sweet corn, zucchini, tomatoes, stuff like that. So he got me into the gardening. I've gardened most of my life. However, it was 2016. So about 6-7 years ago, I went into the state fair, Minnesota State Fair, and I was really amazed by the giant pumpkins that were there. And I thought to myself, why can't I grow these? Why can't I grow giant pumpkins? Because I can grow everything. So I went home that winter and I just started to do a lot of research. One of the things I always tell people is winter time is a time of dreaming and planning, and those two often mesh quite a bit.
Right.
And over the winter you plan everything you need, from seeds to what you're going to do with your soil. Just, it's all planning, and there's all kinds of dreaming involved in that. And obviously I think everybody dreams of world records,
Right.
if state records. That's kind of, if you're into this hobby, I think that's kind of the holy grail, so to speak, is to get either a state or a world record.
Right.
So I went home, I researched. I ended up buying three packets of seeds from St. Croix Growers website, and it was a pack of giant pumpkins, not just general, from I think it read from 1,000-pound giant pumpkin.
Okay.
And then I bought giant sunflower seeds, and I bought giant tomatoes, and those were the first 3 giants that I grew in 2017. So just, what's that, 6 years ago now?
Right.
So just 6 years ago is when I started my giant journey. And it has been a whirlwind of just fulfillment, excitement, joy, camaraderie. I've met so many people in this hobby. I absolutely cannot say enough for how this hobby has really, really changed just me as a person.
Right.
In the sense of, I gardened before, but it wasn't much more than just getting a bunch of food at the end of the season and giving it to friends and family.
Right.
Now you have that camaraderie, you have that competition, you have, it's fun putting that little seed in the ground, and just what it can turn into is nothing short of a miracle.
Right. It is. It's a lot of fun, and you run a group too, don't you?
Yep. A couple of years ago, I started a group on Facebook called Garden of Giants. The reason for starting it was I felt like my normal Facebook, I was putting too many plant pictures on. So I thought, well, why don't I, make a Garden of Giants group? There's some pumpkin groups out there, but there's not much really if you want to get into all the giants. And after that first year growing different giants, I'm like, oh, what about this giant? What about this giant? I started to just really, really get into all the different giants out there. And you don't want to go on. I always felt weird going on a pumpkin group and putting a picture of my carrot or my, watermelon or whatever. So
Right.
I thought, I'm going to just make this little Garden of Giants group, and, maybe a few people will come on and see the pictures. But it has turned into something more than that. And really what my main goal with the group Garden of Giants is recognition and rewards. We all work extremely hard on these giants, no matter what it is. I don't care if it's a runner bean, an onion, a cabbage, a pumpkin, a watermelon, a cantaloupe. It doesn't matter. If it's a giant, you're putting so much extra effort into that giant because it needs that TLC, extra technique, the extra, all the extra work. And at the end of the day, it's, obviously is going to
You're breaking up real bad.
The recognize. I'm breaking up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. There he went. He's gone. He's off. We'll get him back. Just give me a minute. Hello. Let me write him and so he's having a little bit of issue with the internet, but he'll be back in. Like he was saying, he runs that Garden of Giants. He's also grown a couple world records that you guys we'll ask him about here in just a minute as soon as he gets signed back in. But yeah, I mean there's a lot of things that he's done, he's accomplished, and he's really a very accomplished grower, and so hopefully we'll be able to get him signed back in here just a second, and everything. But we're going to try to expound on that. And again, if you're asked, here he is right here. If you're wanting to get into the growing them, go to Garden of Giants on Facebook and you find them there. And let's get him back in here. All right.
Okay. Well, if that happens again, I will try to move to a spot in my house.
Okay.
I'm in the basement. I'm going to make to a little grow room / I'm starting to throw some of my awards up, but it's going to be like a little, award room. Yeah. But so I am downstairs and I don't have the best signal downstairs. If it breaks up, I'll head up. I'll head upstairs.
Okay. I was going to say you're breaking up just a little bit already, but we can try it out here.
Okay.
All right. You sound good right now.
Just if I am breaking up, let me know and we'll take a commercial, throw on one of your sponsors, and I'll run upstairs.
I'll just cut you off for a second, and then you can just give me a thumbs up when you're back on ready to go. Okay.
But getting back to, I don't know how much you heard about the Garden of Giants, but I really, really want to use that group to really recognize growers, all of us giant growers, and I want to recognize us on a state and a country and a providence level. So if you get a record at state level, I really want to recognize that, and I'm going to roll out here. I haven't given an official announcement, but I'm going to roll out a recognition program that's going to start this year, 2020. 2023, and it's going to do just that. You get a record in a giant onion for Arkansas, I'm going to recognize you, and it's not just going to be a hey, that was awesome. There's going to be some actual recognition with certificates and possibly patches as well. But we'll get into that. Like I said, in the next week or two, I hope to make an announcement on Garden of Giants about recognition. So
awesome. So somebody like me that has 11 of them in 1 year, I'm gonna be recognized quite a few times then, right?
Oh yeah, you're yeah. If you go to town, you will you can sweep the board, so to speak.
That's right. That's right. And it's all in fun. It's all in fun and the camaraderie, like you said. You know, it's not showboating.
And you know what? Here's yeah, and here's a great example. Ryan, you got what, 11 state records last year?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, state records. Now, under normal circumstances, because none of those were national records or world records, in a normal situation, no one would really ever know that. And and there's not even really recordings of what is in most states.
Right.
If you wanted to know what is your state record onion, most people have no idea. If you wanted to know what your state record rutabaga is, most people have no idea. Your cabbage, even cantaloupe, most people have no idea. So I am working on in every state and every country and every province record, and that's going to tie why I want to do this recognition and awards for people, because that'll get them to work hard for it, and then I'll know about it so that I can keep track of the records. So it'll be really nice, because then everybody will be able to know what state gets what record, and you can and it's actually a lot more it levels the playing field in the sense that not everybody can grow a 500 pumpkin. So if you just try to hit your record, say you're from Alabama, I believe the state record's about 400 or 500 pounds. That's what you need to go for. That's what you try. And if you can hit that 500-pound record, you're just as the guys up north that are growing to 2,500 pounds, because you know what? They will have the same trouble in the South that you're having. So then you can hold your head high and know that you succeeded at 500 pounds, even though, it wasn't a 1-ton pumpkin.
Well,
so, and that's really what I want to get to, because I'm going to push that hobby further and further and make it bigger and bigger.
Right. And I'm glad you kind of brought that up before we get into giant tomatoes. You said, if a person down south in Alabama hits that 500-pound mark, then he's done just as well as a guy hitting 2,000 pounds up north, right? And I'm glad you said that, because if we was to swap places, a southern grower go up north and a northern grower go down south, I think a lot of times what we would find is that southern grower may end up being a little bit better. And I'm not being, like patting southern growers on the back, but I think because we have to deal with the heat, when you eliminate that heat factor in there, we would be a touch better if we swap places than you, because you guys wouldn't never have had to fight a lot of heat. Like you fight heat, yes, like you get 90 degrees and stuff, but not hundreds with the humidity and everything else that goes on down there. And so, it would be cool if a guy from the South moved up north for one season just to grow one time and see what they could produce. Yeah. Now, I'm sure there's going to be things though that they're going to run into that they wouldn't run into the South, that are going to cause them slip up and problems. But I would say
if you had 5 years in the North and 5 years in the South to really gauge it, I bet it would be a very, very interesting test. And here's actually a great example: watermelon and cantaloupe. Nobody in the North can grow a 300-pounder. It just doesn't happen. It can't happen. I mean, I'm not going to say it can't happen, but it's so hard that I think most people don't even try it. And in the South, I'm not going to say a 300-pounder is easy, because it's not easy, but it's much more attainable. And from that line from North Carolina over to Arkansas, it's easier because of the environment, the weather conditions. So You know, in the north, in Minnesota here, I think our state record is 227. And my personal best is about 183 or 180, something like that. And I look at that as I got really dang close to the best. And my goal when I'm melon this year is I want to hit that 220. If I hit 227, 228, if I can get it right in that range, I'm going to feel like I did the absolute best that I could do because I broke the state record.
Right. And you know, it's like you said, there's a lot of things that can be grown better in the South versus the North, or the North versus the South. But tomatoes really aren't one of those things, are they? They grow good in both areas.
Yes. What is really interesting actually about both topics tonight, I'll do a broad paintbrush here. Both tomatoes and sunflowers provide giant growers the opportunity to grow in a small space. That's extremely key. You don't need a 35-foot patch like you do with pumpkins. You can grow a giant sunflower in a 3-by-3-foot spot, and you can grow a giant tomato in the same, a 3-by-3-foot spot, which means you can now jump into the giant growing community and grow something that is larger than life. And you can do it in your on your city lot. You can even do it in a bucket. I mean, I have
5-gallon bucket.
Yep, I've watched them grow some very nice tomatoes up over 5 pounds in buckets, and sunflowers hitting 20 feet tall in a bucket. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. So it's really, I think both of these are incredible giants that can grow in nearly every climate. Obviously with the tomatoes, the warmer it is, the quicker you're going to have a ripen happen.
Right.
And we do with that up here, even in Minnesota, because the time where you're going to have your best growth and your best fruit is going to happen when it's the warmest, when it's in that mid 80s to even up into the low 90s. And tomatoes, and we'll probably get into this later, but tomatoes will ripen in really warm or hot weather in about 30 to 40 days. Whereas if you have some cooler weather, you can push those tomatoes off to, 45, 50, even 55 days.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a difference there. Sunflowers run a little bit different. They are very, very much guided by the sun. It seems like you can't trick them. It just gets to a certain time of year and they just all start maturing. Whether they're 10 feet tall, 20 feet tall, they just all kind of have a maturity time. And they just, I haven't been able to get that to trick them yet. So if anybody knows how to do that, I should probably also preface everything with this statement. I am not the best at any one giant, not even close. I would say probably nobody is. I mean, I suppose if you've grown a world record, you are the best.
Well, hang on. But both of us have grown world records.
Okay, so I have grown a one world record, but so maybe I was the best at least for that season. But it's the fun part about giants is you're always something new you can do. And what's really cool is there are so many ways to grow the same giant and attain incredible success. My way, what I say tonight, isn't necessarily the same way that's going to, grow up for you. I lost my train of thought. I was going to go somewhere else, but just know that the big thing is you need to know your soil. Soil and seed are the absolute two. That's your. If you don't have the correct soil and you don't have the correct genetics, you're never going to get anywhere. I always hear people say, "Oh, don't waste good genetics on until you know your soil." I don't agree with that statement. There are such out there, and there's always going to be plenty of good genetics. Always try your best genetics all the time. Every time you put that seed in the ground, it better be the best genetics that you can get or afford, because you don't want to. I am breaking up. Am I breaking up?
You're cleared up now.
Okay. Am I? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just reiterate. Always use the best genetics. I don't care if it's your first year or your 5th year, because here's the deal. When you're growing, you never know when you're going to get that special seed and that special weather and that special moment to make that magic. And if you say, I don't feel like I'm good enough, I'm going to use a subpar seed or not the best genetics you could.
Right.
A total fallacy. I would always use the best genetics that you can get a hold of, the best genetics that you can afford every single time you put that seed in the ground, because you want that opportunity, that monster. And if the soil is right and the weather is right and the stars align and God is with you and, everything works out and you get something so incredible, you don't want to mess that up with, not planting the best seed.
Right.
Like this, I don't know, maybe some of you guys know a 2365 Wolf. I'm going to throw one of those in the ground this year, even though I just moved. I just moved to a new place. That's why I didn't grow last year. And there's 2 feet of snow out there, and I haven't even figured out exactly where I'm going to put a garden on my property. So, and there's never been a garden on this property. So
really,
I am going to use the best genetics this year in virgin soil, which is good. That's exactly how you want to do it. And you always want to do it, whether it's your first time starting or whether you've done it for 5 or 10 years. Use the best genetics every time you put that seed in the ground. And that's where I will differ from a few people. Just always know that you're always going against yourself, and it's always about beating yourself. That's a huge thing. And now we can get into the tomatoes and the sunflowers.
All right. So let's talk about the tomato. Let's talk about your first year growing tomatoes versus your 2021 season when you grew a 9.06 pound giant tomato, which was 4th or 5th, you said, in the world at the time.
Yeah. When it was growing, I believe it was number 5. I look back. I believe it was number 5, the 5th largest ever grown. The second largest that year, I missed it by just 0.03 ounces. I mean, it was so minimal. Maybe if I had kept it on one more day, I would have been number 1. But oh well, there's always next year. That's what I always say.
That's right.
Whenever you don't make it one year, you always got next year. So
that's right.
So yeah, I started, like I said, 2017 was my very first tomato year. I got some decent genetics from the St. Croix Growers Club, and I kept them not really knowing. I mean, I've grown regular tomatoes, so it didn't really
breaking up again.
Know what I was doing. I am breaking up. Okay.
Yeah.
If it continues,
okay.
Am I still breaking up?
No, you sound good now.
Okay.
You sound good.
So, 2017, got my first seeds from St. Croix Growers. Planted those. I've grown tomatoes before, so I kind of knew what I was doing. But I just kind of thought maybe these genetics just make big ones. Now, so I didn't do any sort of pruning, any sort of technique. So I think the big thing over soil that I'm going to talk about tonight, because everybody's going to be different on soil. So the thing I'm going to talk about more so is technique. Once you get your seed and your seed and your soil correct, then it's all about technique. If you can nail that technique, then you have just as good a chance as anybody on earth to grow a giant, especially a giant tomato. In my mind, giant tomatoes are a little easier than most of, and maybe it's because I've had some success, but somebody that's been stuck at 4 pounds forever would not agree with me, but
Yeah.
but
Me.
I think if you really tune in your technique, I think you have a really good chance to grow an incredible giant. And so 2017, let's just do some numbers here. I did grow 1 to 4 pounds, which I was absolutely impressed with, and it went along with my 763-pound pumpkin. Between that and my tomato, I was absolutely hooked into giant gardening.
Oh yeah.
So then the next year, 2018, I moved up to just 4.32 pounds. I didn't jump nearly as much as I had hoped. Whereas my pumpkin, I went from 763 to 1434. So a good jump there. But my then the following year, 2019, I jumped it up just to 4.65. So I was really getting into that whole, man, I cannot grow a giant tomato. And then that's when I jumped onto a tomato team. Bigpumpkins.com used to. I haven't, I mean, I guess they did it this year. Every year we'll do a tomato team, kind of a group event where you team up with 3 or there's 3 growers total, and you're either an A grower, a B grower, or a C grower.
Right.
And if you're I think if you're 4 pounds or under, you're a C grower.
Yep.
And then like 4 to 7 pounds or 4 to 6 pounds is a B, and then over 6 or over 7, something like that, is an A grower. And
right.
I got put in as a B grower because I had hit 4 pounds, and I got teamed up with Marv. Men, oh, I don't know why I forgot his name. He wrote a tomato Bible. So the guy was just absolutely an absolute incredible resource. In fact, I ended up growing bigger tomatoes that year than he did,
Wow.
which was cool. And our team, we didn't win that year. But then I came back the next year in 2020, and I got onto another team. And I that was the year I grew my 7.35 pounder. I used a lot of techniques I learned from Marv and also Dan McCoy. He was our old, not only state record holder here in Minnesota, but he actually is a former world record holder. So this is a neat little story. When I first started, about a year before I started growing tomatoes, a year or two, Dan McCoy from Ely, Minnesota, grew an 8.41 pound tomato in a greenhouse up in Ely, Minnesota, and
Wow.
won the world record. He grew the largest tomato ever since that big, what was it, a 7.7 hunt, had grown
Right.
down in, had fallen and grown across the ground. It was a cool story, but Dan grew that, and I remember getting into this and kind of getting onto Big Pumpkins and on one of the chats one time and saying that I'm a grower from Minnesota. I'm trying giant tomatoes. And it was really cool because Dan, not only did he give me some information, but he gave me 3 of the world record seeds. And,
wow.
and I was so blown away by that incredible act of, it was just so nice. And
Right.
I sat there at these little seeds that came from a world record, and I just thought, I can't even grow a tomato to 1 pound. And I was it was incredible. And then to just 7 years later beat his old state record with my 9 pounder, and at the time it was a world record. To beat that was what it tells me is that anybody in this hobby, if they put in the time and the work and the technique and the research and the learning and the asking questions, anybody, because in that moment when I looked at those seeds, I thought, I will never in my lifetime grow an 8.41 pound tomato. That was beyond my comprehension. Right. And to just in 6 years, or or it wasn't even that much long later, but he got that record. And then 7 years later, I broke that record. And in my timeline, it was probably 4 years later from when I thought that. And
Right.
in 4 years to just go from not being able to grow anything to growing something so incredible it's part of why this hobby is so unique and so special. And I just I can't get enough of telling everybody about it.
Yep.
As those that know me know.
Yep. I'm the same way. Let's just real quick tell everybody give a comparison of how big a 9.06 pound tomato is.
So this is the easiest way that I explain it to everybody is an NBA basketball measures 27.5 inches around. That's an official NBA basketball, 27.5 inches round. My tomato measured 27.75 inches around, which is unbelievable, absolutely amazing. But it's like, I mean, obviously, if you see the tomato, there's grooves in it and stuff, so it's not like a perfect ball.
Right.
But if you took that tape and you just went around 27.75 inches, it was absolutely amazing. And to have something that is, I literally say is the size of a big bass, a bowling ball, or a baby, at 9 pounds. And I mean, it's unbelievable. And then what's really cool, and most of you guys may either know this or maybe don't know this that are watching. For me to get seeds from that tomato and then, give them to a couple, very, very nice couple over in Wisconsin, Julie and Del Foss, and then to have them grow an incredible world record, 11.65 pounds, an official world record. Dan has grown some monsters, and if they were official, they would be. But to grow an official 11.65 pound world record, nobody could break that 10-pound barrier outside of Dan Sutherland, which he's a fantastic tomato grower. Just incredible. But for what I like to call us mere mortals, that don't have that absolute, whatever Dan has, he's just perfect.
Yep.
But for me to even be a part of that, and the cool part, not only was my seed a part of growing that, which was really, I mean, that is something that is, until it happens to you, when somebody takes your seed and grows something amazing, you will never know that feeling. It's incredible. But for them to bring it, so I'm an MC at a few different weigh-offs every year, and the Stillwater Harvest Fest through the St. Croix Growers in Stillwater, Minnesota. I was the MC this last year of the event, and Del, he walks it through the parking lot, and I kind of walk, oh, what's in the basket, Del? And he lets me peek a little bit, and I just was like, are you kidding me? That's one tomato. It was amazing. And then he's like, that's from your seed. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? So it was so incredible to watch, just their joy and their excitement for growing something so absolutely amazing. Watching the, 300 or 400 people standing there, absolutely mind blown by this. And just the entire day was just, I mean, obviously Stillwater's known for big pumpkins, and, we had 2,000 pounders there, and that's all cool and awesome and everything. But to see, an 11.65 pound tomato was absolutely amazing. And I'm so happy for those two, and to be a part of it in a couple different ways, being the one to announce it was just amazing. I loved every second of it. And then to be, to get what I like to call the assist with the seed,
right.
that was absolutely incredible as well. So it's, I don't know. It's like I always go back to, this is such an incredible hobby. So
It is.
But yeah,
It is. So, what do you think are some of the key factors in growing a giant tomato outside of seed, outside of fine tuning your soil? What can help,
yeah. So
the average person go
let's
out there and
get
have
in.
a,
So yeah, everybody, get your like a teacher will tell you, get your pen and paper ready. I'm gonna give you some things that I have done that have just worked really well for me. And I really truly believe if you put some of these techniques, if you put all of them to work, you're going to get a tomato, I believe, that will always hit 5 pounds or greater. And I shouldn't say that, because I got to preface it with this first thing. So when you're growing giant tomatoes, you got the seed, you put it in the ground, your soil's tuned in based on your soil tests and what you need. Remember, right off the bat, pH, absolutely critical. 6.7 is what I always aim for. 6.7 to 6.8 is what I grew both my 7 and my 9 pounder in. And here's the reason why. When you look on that nutrient uptake chart, when they can uptake the most nutrients, that 6.7, 6.8, right in that range, it is like, and I give this example when I'm talking about giant pumpkins too. It's like the entire buffet is open to these tomatoes. They can freely eat whatever they want. They get all the nutrients they want. And obviously your nutrients have to be balanced. So
right,
if your calcium's way too low, it doesn't matter if your pH is perfect, because now you have a lack there. So I got to preface it with that. If you have your soil tuned in and that pH is correct, you're now allowing that tomato or that sunflower or that pumpkin, or you put your giant that you grow in there, you allow it to take up everything that it needs to take up. And that's extremely important, because the moment you cut some of that off, you cut the potential off. And that's why somebody gets a 2145 McMullen or an 1885 Werner, and they don't get a 2,000 pound pumpkin, because something was amiss. And it could be
right,
weather related, it could be disease, it could be, there's so many things in the giant world. But if your soil's tuned in, always start with that 6.7, 6.8. And don't get me wrong, if you're at 7.1, it's minor, but you're starting to go in the wrong direction. So
right,
I do a somewhere in there, that would be good. But here's how you do it. So when the tomato grows, there's going to be trusses that come up. A truss is where the flower forms. There's a first truss, a second truss, third truss. As the tomato grows, you'll get trusses. I believe both my 7 and my 9 were both on a second truss. So here's the absolute key to getting a tomato over 5 pounds. Now, is it possible without? Yes, but very difficult. You need
right.
a mega bloom. Now, when I say mega bloom, most people have no idea what I mean by mega bloom. So think of if there's single blooms and they're fused together, almost like conjoined twins. They're separate, but they're together. So if they're fused together, and that is called a mega bloom. A mega bloom, some people call them a caterpillar bloom, but they're fused to the flowers. That's important because it gives you a bigger volume in the way of cells
Right.
when it starts growing. Now, it has to stay fused by your life. If it breaks away from each other, then it.
You broke up right there. It has to stay fused. What?
Did I break up
Yeah.
again? Sorry, break up. Okay, am I back?
No.
Or am I still breaking?
It's really bad.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. It sounds better now.
Let's okay. Is it back maybe?
Yep. So
okay.
You said it has to stay fused?
Yes, it has to stay fused all the way to maturity. So when that tomato is turning red and you pick it, it has to be fused, 100% fused. If it's not, it does not count as one tomato.
Does it matter how big the fuse is?
Well, it does and it doesn't. A single blossom giant tomato should be able to attain 3 or 4 pounds on its own. So if you think about it, you should be able to get upwards of an 8-pound tomato off just a double fuse. Now there is an incredible grower, John Young, up in I think he's in Connecticut. I hope I got that right. Or he might be New York. No, I think Connecticut. But he grew a single blossom tomato this year to 7.95 pounds, almost an 8-pound tomato off of one blossom. That is absolutely incredible, because what that tells me is you could get now a double fuse and you could go 12, 14, maybe 16 pounds off of just a double. So you don't necessarily need caterpillar ones where there's like 4 or 6 fuses together, because here's the problem with the fused or the mega blooms. They are very difficult to pollinate. They're tougher than in fact, the caterpillar ones are the toughest, because they will literally open sometimes over like 4 or 5 days. So you got to sit there and you got to pollinate every single day. And we'll get into pollination here in a second. You can always let the bees do it, but you're growing a giant. You need to make sure, you pollinate along with the wind and the bees. But, and even a mega bloom may open, one that's fused 2 or 3 may open a couple days, up to a day or 2 apart. So you need to, pollinate, pollinate those mega blooms. Now, here's the absolute key. If you don't get that mega bloom pollinated, then you're almost never going to get over 4 pounds. It's almost impossible. So what I would do is wait for the next mega bloom. Do not pollinate a single blossom, because you're not going to have that opportunity to get a giant. So key number 1, you must pollinate a mega bloom. You must get a mega bloom to pollinate. Once you get a mega bloom to pollinate, then I really get into there's a couple things you do. One is your mega bloom that you pollinate, you're going to want to look at the stem from the mega bloom to the plant. If that stem is really puny and thin, more than likely you will not get over 5 pounds. I have really found that you need a thick stem. And if you look at the 11 pounder, my 9 pounder, even my 7 pounder, those stems were so incredibly thick, over an inch across. In fact, my 9 pounder, I think, was over 2 inches across. And it was thick when it was a mega bloom. I mean, you looked at that stem, wish I could throw pictures up here, but I don't even have them ready. But if you looked at that stem when it was just a bloom, that stem was over an inch thick. And obviously it swelled as it grew. But I think that is because I've had a lot of mega blooms, bloom and pollinate, and they turn into great 5 pounders. But I started wondering why. That looked incredible. Why did it only get 5 pounds? And when I really started looking at it, the stem feeding it from the plant to the fruit, I think is absolutely critical. And I think most people completely miss that. And then this is where the work comes in. When you have your mega bloom and you have your mega bloom on a thick stem, a big thick stem, then you got to get to pollen or pruning like you've never pruned before. You will cut off within 1 week of that tomato taking. I want every bit of new growth off that thing. I cut every single new growth off that tomato, and every day I would go out there and there would be new buds popping up. Sometimes it got to the point where on a leaf there was a bud popping because it wanted to keep growing. And I wanted all that energy into that tomato. And so every day I would go out there, every single, I cannot stress this enough. If you guys are listening out there and you want a chance at a big tomato, every single new growth that is on that plant has to be taken off every single day. You want every ounce of that energy going into that tomato.
So you're
then
like even the ends, like what about the top? You don't allow it to grow up any further on the main or nothing?
So
you cut it off.
No, so my 9-pound tomato grew, the plant only hit 42 inches. It was 42 inches tall. That was it. I cut it off and it never grew an inch taller. It was 36 by 38 inches. I had grown a pretty good bush. It was pretty decent size. So there was enough leaves there to feed it. And if you and Dan McCoy, remember the guy I talked about earlier that had the old record? He did a special pruning technique that got to 8 pounds, and that was on a little 2-foot plant. So you don't need much of a plant to produce monster tomatoes. Remember, energy is absolute key. These things are creating a lot of energy. And if you allow that energy to be broken between fruit and vegetation, you will never grow a giant tomato. So I'm telling you right now, you listen to this and you have an edge. You will bring the biggest tomato of your life. And I want you to get on Garden of Giants and tell me about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is absolutely imperative that you cut every new growth off that, and every flower. I mean, you are dealing with one tomato on one plant that has zero growth. You can go out there every day and make sure it has zero growth. So that's where it gets more like, almost like you feel like you're dealing with pumpkin, where you're dealing with it every single day. Is when you got something going good. And I got a 25-inch circumference. I'm going to take 25 inches in 25 days. And I grew my 9-pounder from flower to 9 pounds in 41 days. It was absolutely an incredible growth. And it's the power of the plant forcing all the energy into that fruit. And
do you worry about splits
it was incredible. Yeah, I was always worried about splits, but it didn't split. So I think when it's green, when the tomato's green, it's a little more elastic. Plus, from the second, it's a fruit, I cover it with a white sheet, a white towel. And it's a smaller white, kind of a wash rag type thing. But I cover it because just like pumpkins, I don't want the sun touching it. UV rays are great at maturing stuff and drying skin out. And then that's when cracks happen. Now it's naturally going to happen when it turns red. Once it starts turning red, that's where you get incredibly nervous, because when it's red, that skin has pretty much tightened up. And if you get a little bit of, get a nice little rainstorm, you start getting cracks. Now, legally, a tomato can be cracked. It just can't be oozing. So if you get some growth splits, you can still legally put it into a weigh off and it's fine. It just cannot leak. So, when my 7 and my 9-pounder were at their last day, you get nervous, you see a crack form, and you just get really nervous. And I believe both the 7 and the 9, I could have waited another, once I got them off and felt how solid they were, I probably could have gone 2 to 3 more days on each of them, maybe even a hair longer. But when you got something big.
How much do you think they would have grown in those few days if you'd have left them?
Not much. You're probably talking an ounce or 2, probably at most. It wouldn't have been, dramatically different. But, I always say, when you're picking your time, I like to wait for the tomato to be 3/4 red. And in both situations, I probably did it a hair before 3/4, just because it's kind of like here, a good fishing example. You catch a 10-pound walleye and you're gonna fight and have fun with all the other 9-pounders. It's that 12-pounder that you're really gonna freak out about and try to get. So
Right.
the 7, if I just had a 7 out there, I probably would have let it go as long as I could to get it higher, but because it was, I probably cut off, right? Did I cut
Yeah.
out?
Yeah. You're cutting off.
Okay. Hopefully I'm back. Am I
You're back. Yep.
Okay. So the hope is, or the, when I had something that was measuring bigger than my 7-pounder, then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm really nervous. This could be a new personal best for me. You know, you just get antsy. You don't want anything to happen. I tell you, that night before I picked it, I could not even sleep. I kept turning on the garden lights to look out and make sure there wasn't like a deer next to the plant or something. I mean, it was just you. And when you're there, when you're a giant grower and you're to that point, and you have something really special, and you will not get sleep, you'll be stressing. And it's,
Yep.
you know what? It's good. It's good stress because you know that you did something really good. So
Yep.
it's a stress that I absolutely want every single year I grow. And then let's see what else. So another important thing is when they get probably about 3 or 4 pounds, you could even do it before then, is you create a sling for them. A
Okay.
sling is going to be, I make it out of nylon, women's
Like
nylon.
a hammock.
Yep. It's a hammock. Yep. And what that'll do is it'll allow the fruit to grow, but yet be supported. Is going to get so big, there is no way that stem or that branch can hold that. And what will happen is if it snaps, if it kinks, you're going to lose a lot of energy. And when we get into sunflowers, there's the same thing that happens with sunflowers with the kinking. And if the pipes kink, you don't get everything to where you where you want it to go. So putting it in a hammock is extremely important. Now, I believe Dell and Julie, the ones who grew the 11-pounder, I believe they built a little platform, a solid platform for it to sit on and grow. And that really makes me wonder if that allowed it to
get bigger,
to focus more on getting bigger and less on making the support to it strong. And that's something I'm going to talk about in the sunflowers, with the tall versus the whiteheads.
Right.
But yeah, that's, I mean, in a nutshell, that is the technique you want to do with tomatoes. It's really simple. It's really easy. But if you've never grown giants before, it's really weird to have to take off all the tomatoes, it is so, it just makes sense. And it's hard to do. There were times where I'm like, I can't cut this top, but I did it. And when I did it and I grew 7 pounds, I'm like, man, I'm cutting every tomato in the future. I'm going to just prune that thing like a barbershop quartet, man. Here I come.
I never cut the tops off.
Yeah. So next year you're going to grow an incredible one. I can already feel it. And just follow those techniques. Very simple, but follow them.
I've had this thought for a couple of years, and I want to run it past you while we have everybody here. So let's say we've got our plant, we're growing it. We have our first 2, let's call them secondaries, but they would be sucker vines, which you technically don't want on a tomato plant. Okay. Now that we know, well, at least on a giant, you don't want it. Let's say we took those first sucker vines, we bent them down to the ground, rooted them in, deadheaded them after the root took, and then went straight up and cut the top off and took off all the other. Do you think there'd be any beneficial gain to that?
Yes. And that is one thing I didn't mention, but with my 9-pounder, I did that exact thing. The very first sucker, it comes off right at the bottom. the very first sucker, I bent it over and I allowed it to root about 6-7 inches. And then it came up. I had about 3 or 4 leaves on it, maybe 6 leaves. And then I chopped it and it was done.
Okay.
So not only did it provide a little bit of, a little bit extra solar power, but I had a little bit more in the way of roots. Now, I do have to say, when I dug that plant up in the fall, the main part the roots were insanely big. I mean, and they were everywhere. So,
right.
It's hard to say. I don't think it hurt it. Let me put it that way. I don't think that it took enough extra energy to create that extra little root section. But
right.
that main plant the roots on it were just incredible. There was so many. It was probably down over, the bigger roots were down over a foot, maybe 1.5 feet deep, which was incredible. I'm on a sandy loam soil, so obviously roots can go a little further. They're not fighting clay.
Right.
But I was really impressed with the root structure of all my tomatoes that year. And I didn't want to put it out there. I've told a few people, but I didn't want to put it out there because it could just simply be coincidence that the 9 came, there wasn't, in my mind, there wasn't enough roots because I only had a maybe section of stock there that had rooted. And to me, it made logical sense. We bury our vines in pumpkins, so why not get more roots? More roots equals more nutrient uptake. So it made sense to me. And then, and I should say I did it on about 3 or 4 other plants that only got up around 5-6 pounds. So, I don't know if I'm sure people will test the theory. Sure, it'll be done. I'll probably try it again just because, it did happen to, hit my 9. But, if you ever get a chance and look at Dan McCoy's world record 8-pounder, 8.41, it's a straight up plant, 2 feet tall, first truss mega. It's the list you're like, how that plant make that tomato? It just doesn't even make sense. So I think the tomato plant itself doesn't need many leaves because its roots are just incredibly, intense and thick and can really pull in the food.
If you think about this, anytime a tomato plant gets sick in the garden, it can be sick and have a bunch of tomatoes on it. The leaves be falling off, turning yellow left and right, and it'll still produce until that plant is just completely done. So it really kind of makes you wonder how. Of course, the leaves have to be there. They have to create photosynthesis, of course, but it makes you wonder, like you said, how much do they need versus how much the roots are pushing? It makes sense.
I believe that. Yeah, I believe those tomato plants are incredibly powerful when it comes to, pulling up nutrients, and because I've been with you. I've seen a tomato plant have 100 tomatoes on it, and you're just. Oh, did I cut out again?
Yep.
Sorry.
You're good.
Hopefully I'm back.
So yeah, you're back. You see a tomato plant that had what?
Yeah, I've seen tomatoes that are basically dead and they have 100 tomatoes on them, and you just scratch your head at that. That's just incredible that they can still, and at that point in the season, they have really, and this is why I don't believe they need that foliage, that cutting every bit of growth is advantageous to making that tomato big, because I feel like at the end of the season, they turn everything to fruit anyways. So if you can cut that a little early during its most peak powerful performance and push that into that tomato, I really, truly think that's how you're going to get bigger tomatoes.
So we got a question here. Shadow Knight Gladstay says, so do you think you can get bigger next year?
Well, that's the hope. That's the dream. That's the plan. And I am going to try. We'll see. You never know. And it comes down. it comes down to if you can get a good mega blossom pollinated. If, you know, if by June I don't have a bunch of megas, or maybe July, mid-July, if I don't have a bunch of mega blooms pollinated, you know, I would say it's not gonna happen. But if I have a nice ones pollinated, I definitely think I can tweak a and possibly, and obviously at the point when you use all the genetics and your soil is tuned in, it does come down to pushing it and technique, and you know, there's a fine line there that even, you know, I don't consider myself a pro tomato grower. I know people do, but I feel like I don't know enough to get a 10-pounder.
Right.
And honestly, I don't even feel like I know enough to get another 9-pounder. Sometimes I feel like I just got lucky.
Right.
And you know, and that's the part of me that I think is really humbling in the giant growing world, because you can grow something amazing and then the next year you flat on your face, and it humbles you quick when that happens.
Very quickly.
And that's the fun challenge of giant growing, is that, and that's that really, in the overall theme of giant growing, what's neat is nobody has giant growing's number, which means there's new people all the time that can take the records. And that's really exciting, because it means that nobody has it figured out. And nobody, you know, it's not like the Yankees where they win every single year, you know, like, or you know, pick your favorite sports team, or your perfect athlete, where you just always win and you don't stop winning. You can have the best grower in the world and he will have an off season because, you know, of this, and this. So it's, you know, I always want to say I'm going to better myself. I'm going to beat my personal best every year. All my goal is to get a new personal best. If I can get a new personal best, then I've achieved it. And then at some point, when you keep getting your own personal best, you're going to now hit a state record. And then eventually you're going to hit a world record. That's how you get to world record. You don't try to bite it all off. You just keep beating your own record. And if you can do that, I assure you, you will get a state, if not a world record, which is awesome.
So Teresa Phillips says, since I grow all tomatoes in pots, would a wider pot be better than a deeper pot? I usually grow in 5-gallon pot.
So here's a secret I'm going to let for growing tomatoes in pot.
You're breaking up.
That I think will improve the. Oh, let me know when I'm back.
You're good.
If I'm good. So here's a secret for growing in a 5-gallon pot. If you can grow your initial plant, and then when that plant gets tall enough, cut another bucket in half, tape that bucket back together and fill that with potting soil, and allow that next 6, 8, 10 inches of stem to turn also into roots. And now you're going to double your root ball, and that will give your tomato that much more energy into growing. In fact, somebody did that in Kentucky, and he got the Kentucky record. He grew in a pot 5.75 pounds, and how he did it was he grew in a 5 bucket, and then he then put another, I think, 3-gallon or something like that, on top of it to get those extra roots, basically build those extra roots in. You know, if you can, I mean, if you're going to go wider, then you might as well just go up to maybe like a 10, 15, 20-gallon bucket. Just get, I mean, in raised beds or buckets or containers, the roots will go everywhere within that container. So the larger area you give it, the healthier, you know, your plant's going to be, the bigger it's going to get, the bigger the fruit, because you're now giving it that much more ability to create all those little hair roots to go feed all that nutrients within that soil. So bigger is always better when you're dealing with containers. So go the biggest you possibly can. Or with tomatoes, they're one of the few things you can kind of cheat with, and you can get more roots as they grow.
Right. So John M.N. here, he says, is it crucial to set one on the main stem, or does your chances of a big one decline if you set one on a branch further out?
So the two places I would try to set a mega bloom would be your main stem or your first sucker. So that first sucker stem that comes right off at the bottom, it's about an inch or two up. That first comes up, I would try to pollinate the megas on that one. If you can get that one or the main one with mega, the chances of a thicker stem hooked to much better on that main one or the main sucker, because those are the two biggest. Get the smaller suckers, they may produce a mega bloom, but 99% of the time that stem is going to be so small to that mega bloom, it's not even worth your time to pollinate. So
I've noticed that if I do that sometimes, that they will actually rot, as the mega bloom up further will actually be so small that I don't know if it rots but it just dies. Like you'll pollinate it, and as it's trying to grow, it just kind of turns yellow and just falls off.
well, I will say that mega blooms are extremely tough to get to. I mean, it is no understatement that to get a mega bloom to pollinate nicely is this is half, if not more, of your battle. Once you get that mega bloom pollinated, then and let me explain pollination, because I didn't really get involved with it earlier. So when you see a mega bloom, you're going to see just this monster bloom sitting there. It's not open yet, but it's sitting there. And you got to get ready. You got to get mentally prepared, because it's going to be a, 2, 3, 4 day run of you pollinating as much as possible. You can let the bees do it. You can let the wind do it. And I may have cut out. Let me know if I'm back. Am I good?
Yeah, you're back. I'm just showing everybody a picture of a mega bloom.
Yeah, so that one is a mega bloom that's already swelling. That's swelling, right. So it already got pollinated. Yep.
Right.
But here, so the absolute
here's one.
How you do it. Yeah, that one's probably 2 days old, more than likely. If you guys can see that, I've never seen a mega bloom. See how it almost looks like 3 tomatoes on there? It's fused. They're fused tomatoes. But here's how you do it. So my 9-pounder, it opened the first day, and just a few of the little yellow flowers showed. And I went up and I did a couple different things. I would tap, just a quick little flick or tap of the stem down lower. You don't want to go right up to the flower and hit it. You're going to break it off. And then I have an electric toothbrush that's devoted just to pollination. And again, that electric toothbrush, I will not touch the actual flower. I will go about 2 to 4 inches, maybe even a little further below it. And I will put that electric toothbrush right up to the plant. And so what that plant is doing is it's kind of vibrating. It's almost like a big bumblebee came over to the flower, and they have that buzz, so that is extremely important, because all those pollens have to fall, and they fall by you flicking it, or they fall by the vibration, and then it fertilizes. It's a self-fertilizing flower. So that pollen is going to continue through 3 days. The pollen will continue to produce, and it needs to be constantly moved down there. Now, a bee will do it, or the wind will blow it. In fact, you can even go up and you can blow on your blossoms, and I do that.
You can also put
blow
fans.
On all my. Yep. You could put fans too. Now, I wouldn't do a constant fan. I would do an oscillating, because you want it to go back and then get blown. Because then the pollen becomes loose. If you're always blowing it, the pollen just it would be very tough. So do that, and then the next day it's going to open a little more, and you just have to do it until the entire bloom has opened and stopped. And then within a day or two, like that second picture you had showed, you'll start to see swelling. And if you see swelling, you know that it took. If you don't get any swelling, or if the flower like starts to turn yellow and just falls off, it was an abort. So
Yep.
it's, like I said, it's extremely crucial to try to get that mega pollinated. And like I said, if you don't get the mega pollinated, then your chance of getting something really big and really special is almost zero.
Well,
So,
but
if you
in
get it,
our
then
eyes,
it's on.
well, but in our eyes, a really big one is 7, 9, something like that. But the single blooms do have the potential to get 5 pounds, right?
They do. They do.
Okay.
And if you end up going with the single, see, the problem is most people that end up with singles, they just let a bunch of singles go on, and then they eat them.
Right.
Most people, if they get just singles, they're not going to put that intense technique that I talked about earlier into a single. So
Right.
so most people will never really even know if they can get it pounds. So you know what? If at the end of the day you don't get a mega, bloom pollinated, take your best single, the biggest one that you were able to pollinate, eliminate every other tomato on there. And that's tough for some of you non-giant growers or rookies.
Right.
It's tough to take other tomatoes off. I remember my first year, I had a giant grower tell me, take all the tomatoes off but the one you want. And I went home and there was like 20 really nice tomatoes on there. And I'm like,
I want them all.
I can't do this. I just can't do it. So in the giant world, you got to get used to pruning and killing plants. Not
Yep.
killing them, but just, your goal is a competition. You want to try to grow the biggest you possibly can. And every one you leave on there is going to take from the other. So you could try it. I've never tried it with a single, but maybe if I ever get one that doesn't do it, maybe I'll just try it and see how big I can. Because
so.
honestly, if you get a nice, perfect round single, the density should be heavier with that versus the ones that have the air spaces between them. So you could still hit that 5, maybe 6 pound. I mean, like John, he hit almost 8 pounds with a single. So it's something I never thought was possible until I seen John's. I thought that is absolutely incredible to know that a single can get up near 8 pounds. So
we got another question here. Well, I think we might have a couple of them, but In Black says, do you have a favorite fertilizer? And I was going to kind of ask about that too. And as soon as you answer his question, I want to know, does phosphorus attribute to mega blooms? So answer his question and then maybe get to that one. And then we'll go to this last one and pivot to sunflowers.
Yep. So obviously I'm going to preface my entire statement with this. You got to know what your soil is. If you're lacking on something, you use that. But here is what I used on the 9-pounder. Generally speaking, here's what I used. I'm a little bit more of an eyeball guy. So some days I would do a little more, some a little less, versus being like, a teaspoon every time. But here's what I used. I started obviously the plant like I do with all plants. I have a higher nitrogen, a kind of a grow formula that I use. In addition to, this is something I always use. I always use seaweed, and I always use humic and folic acid.
Yep.
So powder forms, I mix them into the water and then dump it on. The humic folic and the seaweed, I use the entire season. That never is not used by me. Where I change is from the nitrogen. I will go to when they're flowering, the phosphorus, the heavier phosphorus. I want a big, strong bloom. And another thing I do, even though I have good calcium levels in my soil, I do add CalMag at least twice a week. And then I also throw some boron in.
Yep.
as well, because boron's an important
Very
connector with
important.
calcium. And if you can't bring the calcium there, it's not going to do anything. So I probably put more boron on than I should, but it seems to work.
Me too.
Uh, I think anybody that grows giants, if they're honest with you, they'll tell you they do way more than what's suggested for boron.
Yep.
But I believe, even though it's a very, very micronutrient, I believe it is important. So I don't want to, let's just say, I don't want to have a lack of it. I
Right.
want there to be an excess, even though, I mean, I don't know if anything's ever gotten really bad, at least in my soil tests. But okay, so during the flowering phase, I do more of a bloom buster formula, so higher phosphorus. And then once I get that bulging, that swelling of the flower, when I know that that fruit has taken, the first maybe 2-3 days, I do about a half dose of an increase in potassium.
Okay.
Um, I think I use the growth products.
0025.
Yeah, I believe that's what it is. Yeah, I think it is 0025. And then within about 3 days, I bring it up to full dose. And as that thing's really chugging, I go probably heavier than I probably should. But you know, my
Right.
my my whole thing is, this thing only has 40 days to grow. If I kill the plant, I kill the plant. Now
Right.
I don't want you guys going and putting on way too much fertilizer, because like I
You
said,
got to watch it. One
I'm
day
an
to the next.
eyeball guy, and you don't want to kill your plant before
No.
peak energy is done, but you want to make sure that it's getting everything it needs when it's moving into that peak energy, because if it doesn't get enough, it will slow down growth. And I measure my tomatoes almost every day. And that may be good, that may be bad. They always tell you in the pumpkin world, don't measure them every day. But I need to know if my growth is steady, increasing, decreasing. I need to know where I'm at in that 40-day cycle or 45-day cycle. That way I know, if I can really feed it good up to peak, and then when it's at peak and I notice it started to drop a little, sometimes I'll just try to do just a little more, see if I can't hold that peak a little longer. And you know what? I've only been growing tomatoes like 4 years. So
Right.
again, I'm not a pro at this. I don't claim to be. It's just what I've tried that has worked for me.
Right.
And I've been able to get some decent success with it. So
You have. So Shadow Knight Gladstay said, can we just get a 30-second recap on how to grow a giant? So I'm assuming a giant tomato, like, just a 30-second short,
yeah,
this,
yeah.
this, this, this.
So real quick, it's going to be 30 seconds. You can time me. Get great seed, great soil. The soil, you have to do a soil test, figure out where your levels are, send it to one of us growers that know how to read a soil test. And then the key is, when your plant is growing, you can allow that first sucker to grow, and you can even allow some of the other smaller suckers to grow. You're looking for a mega bloom. Mega
Yep.
bloom is the multi-bloom, the fused bloom. You need to pollinate that. That has to be pollinated. You can pollinate with an electric toothbrush. You can pollinate it by flicking the branch. Remember, don't do the flower itself. You got to do it down lower. Your goal is just to move that flower to shake the pollen down, and then you can blow on it. But you need to get that mega bloom pollinated. Once the mega bloom's pollinated, then you go into technique. You're going to cut all new growth off, side growth, top growth, anything new that's growing. Any other tomatoes that are on there have to come off. You want that plant to turn into energy feeding the tomato, not growing new vegetation. You have to do it. It's going to be hard, but you have to go out every day, and you just have to chop all new growth off. You have to cover your tomato. That will keep the sun off it. You don't want the sun. Sun tends to pre-ripen stuff. And then you want to have a little hammock or sling to support the tomato as it grows and gets bigger, so you don't get any kinking or breaking of vines. That will eliminate your tomato from growing any bigger if that happens. And that really is about it. That's and then the fertilizers I said I used, during fruiting stage, it's I'm pretty much doing just potassium, seaweed, CalMag, boron, and humic folic. That's pretty much all I'm doing. Sometimes I'll throw a bit of micronutrients in there, and every once in a while I'll throw a little bit of nitrogen in there. If I notice when I go out and I'm, every day I'm into picking off 3 or 4 new growths. If all of a sudden there's only one new growth, then I'm like, oh, it might need just a little bit of, just a little bit of help. So I'll throw just a little bit of nitrogen. Just
Okay.
going the other way. And that's really all I do. It probably was a bit longer than 30 seconds, but nice and quick.
You're fine. You're fine. You're fine. So I think it was a good rundown. So that is, the giant tomatoes. Now let's kind of switch over and talk about, one of my favorite things. I hold both the state records here in West Virginia for height and for head. So let's talk about sunflowers, and you helped me get my giant sunflower head in 2021. You were the one I went to and I asked and said, hey, what did I do? I remember you saying, push the boron, see if you can get it to bolt in some way and make that head pop, and I did, and it worked. And so let's talk about sunflowers and there's so many different kinds. People, that come to me for seed. I want tall. Well, there's tall and there's tall with big heads. There's tall with small heads. There's just big heads. There's so many different ones, and I think people get lost in all that. So let's just kind of talk about, the different ones and why they, all that.
Yeah. Yep. Let's start with just sunflowers. What are they? They're just a flower, and they're in the giant world, they're not a veggie and they're not really a fruit. They are a flower, which is odd because we're in most of the giants, we're not trying to grow flowers, but this one we are. And sunflowers are beautiful. They're iconic. Everybody loves them. Everybody wants a big one. What is the difference between the big heads and the talls? Like you mentioned, there are a million different varieties of sunflowers. And the unfortunate part is that they will all interbreed, which is kind of a bummer when you're trying to isolate good genetics, because there's not really a way to self-pollinate a sunflower head. In fact, sunflowers have to be pollinated. They have to be cross-pollinated. It's extremely rare to have them self-pollinate. So what that means is if you're going to grow big head sunflowers, grow them together in a group, and then try to isolate your tall sunflowers, or if you have any ornamental fun ones, if you're going to save seeds and continue on. If you're just growing it and you have a seed source, then you can do whatever you want. But if you're going to try to save seeds for the next year's genetics and you're attempting tall or wide, try to isolate them, because if a big old bumblebee flies from one to the other, then all bets are off what those seeds are going to produce.
Right.
And what's interesting is in both tall and wide heads, you can get all black, you can get all white, and you can get striped, black and white striped. And those can actually change from year to year. So you could plant a white one and out comes black ones. It's just crazy. It's amazing. And I guess I don't know exactly why that happens, but I've definitely seen it. But so the wide heads that we look for, I'm not exactly sure what strain they come from, but my guess is they have mammoth head somewhere in their background.
Right.
That would be my guess, but we've brought them past mammoths. So when you see mammoth head sunflowers, yes, they're going to be big. They're going to be a 12 to 15 inch. Maybe if you're really good, you can get maybe up to 18. But 18 is about where giant heads stop if you don't have the right genetics.
Right.
If you want to be bigger than an 18-inch head, and let me back up here, because for those of you that don't know what I mean by 18-inch head, The way that measuring a sunflower head is extremely controversial. Let me put it that way. First off,
Three different ways.
There are three different ways to measure them. One way is you lay a measuring tape across the back of it, and you measure from green petal to green petal, just tip to tip, and that's one way of measuring. The other way is going over the top of the sunflower, from green petal to green petal. With a lot of sunflowers will have a little bit of a cone in there, and so to capture the volume of that cone, that's another way to measure it. And then the third way to measure it is just measuring around the actual head itself, and that will measure the circumference of it around it. And what I would like to see happen, and I don't know if I'll ever get traction on this, but to get the volume of the sunflower, I would love to see measured over the top to get the cone in there if there's a cone, but not including the green petals, because the green petals mean absolutely nothing when it comes to the flower size. So it would be just the flower up over the top and down, and then add on, kind of like in the pumpkin world, we have the OTT, then add the circumference of it, or diameter around the around measurement. So add that one and the over the top to get kind of a sunflower volume. Now, I don't know if that'll ever catch on, because I think most places that do these that actually do sunflower competitions, they just pick whichever way they want, and they're probably not going to change unless
right.
It would have to be a big movement to change it to a certain way. But that's
Right.
the way I like to see, because I believe that captures the volume of the sunflower. But that's a wide head. That if you want to get, so when I say 18 inches, we're measuring more than likely the back, or the top. That would be the two ways that they're measured. If you want to get over that 18-inch mark, you really need to get good genetics. That's absolutely important, because these flowers tend to want to revert back to smaller heads. I don't know why it is, but they want to.
Yep.
But if you can get good genetics and then keep them isolated, you can keep some nice heads going, and that's always a challenge to do. But I've gotten a couple lines here that I have had very good success with getting consistent 25, 27, maybe even 28 inch, measurements, which is, I mean, they're just big heads. Now,
Right.
and the difference is these sunflowers are only going to get 6 to 12 feet tall, and they are going to have, stems on them that will rival a small tree. It is absolutely incredible how thick they get, and they're working to get a big head, and they have to hold that head up. Now, here's one thing: if the upper part right before your flower is not strong enough, or your head gets too big and too heavy, it'll kink. And
right.
if it kinks, you're not gonna get that head you'll get it to open, but it will not open fully. If you look in that middle, you will notice that those seeds do not swell and do not get big.
Like this.
Yep. And at that point that you have left inches on the table, and you're not sure how much, but I've had a couple really nice heads that have kinked, and then they pretty much stop growing.
So how do you keep it from kinking?
So you have to build almost like a tripod above them, and then tie their head up, or tie it to give them support. So you're basically giving support. And however you do it, I mean, you can do a tripod. There's a million different ways.
Is that not going to affect how they follow the sun?
It may a little, but by the time they get so heavy where they're leaning down,
they can't really follow.
They're not really follow. They have turned into filling the seeds up. The seeds are swelling,
right.
And they're working on really getting a massive head full of seeds. So they're not really doing their follow, which they do right when those yellow flowers start popping open. That's when they do their sun gazing.
Right.
So that in a nutshell is the wide head sunflower. The tall sunflower, totally different beast. This one you grow simply to go as tall as you can get it. The head size doesn't matter. In fact, it's probably good to have a smaller head. Although on my 20-foot state record, I had an incredible head. The head I ended up measuring almost 20. I think it was almost 25 inches. It was a monster head. But so I had to do a lot of support with that head
Oh
just to
yeah.
fit from. And I was doing this at the top of I grew it up alongside my long gourd trellis. And then I had to build stuff up beyond that because it had gotten over 20 feet tall. So it was interesting. It was fun. But here is one of the keys, absolute keys to growing tall sunflowers. You want to support that sunflower every foot, 2 foot, 3 foot at most. You want to tie it to something. And because your entire goal is that sunflower needs to grow up, and it does not need to get strong. It doesn't need to build a big stalk. So you want it to put its energy into growing higher and not trying to support itself from the wind. So think of a leggy little seedling. They shoot out and they're just growing, but they have no strength to them. That's what you want for your sunflower. You want it to put all its energy into just growing forward, and you don't want any of that energy to be put into a strong, thick stalk. So you support it as it grows. Every, like I said, every foot, 2 foot, 3
When do
foot.
you start that? When do you start that?
I started when they're about 3 feet tall.
Okay.
And I literally don't want them creating much of anything. They are going to be 100% protected from the wind. They don't need to be strong because they're going to be tied every step of the way that they grow up. In fact, there's days during their peak growth that I feel like I'm tying every single day. And I just want it to keep growing. I do not want it to work on anything with the stem. And I think that's a real key part to growing them tall.
Does it, but does that worry you any when you go to take that down? Do you worry that it's going to be, that the stalk is going to be so flimsy that it'll just snap on you?
Yeah. So when I had my 20-footer, I was so scared to death that thing was going to break. It had the seed head had pretty much dried up. It was all dried. And when I took it actually was, I mean, we had 3 of us there and we took it down with 3 of us, but I was actually quite surprised that even though it was a thin stem, it was still solid. So don't get me wrong. It's not like it's a rubber band. But it just doesn't have to work on the bulk that a normal, a sunflower would have to do to fight against the wind. It can put its energy into growing higher because it does not have to have a very, very strong. Now what it has, I think now that I've done it a couple years, gets real strong. It's just a really thin, it's really thin. And it could, I suppose it could snap, but the ones I've pulled down so far have all held together really well. So and so there's a bit of a difference that I do in between. The big thing is, again, get your soil right, get your genetics. With the soil, what I like to do is I like to put a lot of either urea or manure into the hole. And the manure, I keep it a little bit more fresher. I don't go 3-4 years. It's more like a 2-year manure. And I've had good luck with that. You obviously don't want it to the point where it burns or it's harmful in any way. So you still want it, aged. But
and let's back up just for a second, because it is kind of hard to burn them because they do take up quite a bit of nitrogen very well. It's not like other plants.
Yeah, they do. And honestly, I think the burning would only be fresh manure that may have some high contents of,
Right.
Maybe the salts are too high or something. There might be something there in a fresh manure that just might be too much. But you're right. I don't know. Like I'll set up my hole with some really good manure and some other stuff based on my soil test. But then when I'm feeding them, I'm giving them manure. I like to do CalMag, boron. Those are my go-tos, and
Yep.
I will give them nitrogen 3 or 4 times a week, which is kind of insane based on what I already got in the hole. And they seem to just do really good with it. And the tall, I concentrate more on the nitrogen is I'll go right up to even when the bud's budding out. Whereas the wide heads, when they get up to where I can just start seeing that bud, I will actually back off the nitrogen and I'll go to more of a bloom buster, a high phosphorus, like a 10, 50, 20, or 30. I want that high phosphorus because that tends to help a huge blossom. You want as big of a blossom as possible. And then I'll also try to incorporate more potassium when those seeds are filling out, because that in essence is the fruit part of the plant is your seeds. So I want big seeds, I want big blossoms. So once I see, or if I feel like that head is just under the leaves there, if it's just about to pop, I'll really pull back that nitrogen, and then I'll go really heavy into the phosphorus and the potassium. And then I usually keep the CalMag going, but I will back off on it a little. I really those last few weeks are really about phosphorus and potassium, and then always seaweed, humic, folic. I always do that. I have never personally. Everybody always asks me fish, fish emulsion, fish fertilizer. I have never used it on any of my plants ever, because my fear is I live out in the in the woods,
You'd be
is that I'll
attracting something.
in every animal known to man, and they will just dig up my plants. So I just have made it I just do not use fish anything at any time. Um, so
Right.
if you want to try it, you can. I just don't want to. I don't want to deal with something walking in like a bear
Right.
or something
Digging it
else
all up.
and digging up my plants because they want to find that dead fish.
Right. So when you're staking this up, can we go over the process of how you do? Like in my mind, when I grew my 15-footer in 2021, it got like 10 to 12 foot tall, and I'm like, okay, this thing's about 2 foot taller than everything else. And so I started looking, and I was like, oh well, you can take furring strips and stake them down and zip tie it, and that's what I started doing. And then it got to where it was bigger than that, and I was like, well, so I went out there and zip tied another furring strip on top of that one, and kept having to add on to it as it went, and it eventually got to where I had to park my truck alongside the in the driveway alongside to get another 2 foot and put my ladder up in the truck just to get up there to the top. And so what is, if somebody's wanting to grow this tall sunflower, what's the best thing that they can do ahead of time to ensure that this doesn't happen?
Yeah. So I have a long gourd trellis. I mean, I like I said earlier, I moved to a new location. I got to build a new trellis this year and everything. But I had a long gourd trellis that was 15 feet tall. So, and it was quite wide. I had like 4 or 5 posts across it. So at each post is where I would plant my talls. And as they went up the post, what I did was, I put in right next to the post, I put in a 20-foot rebar. You go buy a big long piece, you need a trailer to do it. I put that in, I tied that with zip ties to the let me back up. Then I put on PVC pipe, and the PVC pipe is what is actually attached to the sunflower, but the PVC pipe is attached to my trellis. So I got the 4x4s in the ground solid to the PVC pipe, and then the sunflowers attached to the PVC pipe. It's white PVC pipe. I didn't want to do gray because I didn't know if the sun would pull too much heat and that might do something.
Now,
But
where did the rebar come into play?
I did the rebar just more so for extra support, extra strength.
So you had your
it would be the PVC would go over the rebar.
Okay.
So, and that way, what I could do is I got that 20-foot piece that would go down the ground, maybe 2 or 3 feet, maybe 4 feet. So I could put on a 10-foot, and then I could put another 10-foot. So I'd have 20 feet of PVC. And then if I had to, without the rebar on top, I could probably put another 2, 3, 4 feet, whatever. If
Is
I
it half inch rebar, 3/2 inch rebar, 3/4 rebar?
Yeah. I think I used 1 3/4 and the rest were all halves.
Okay.
I probably would do the 3/4 because I feel like it's a little more stable and strong. Right. And then, just I want to say probably a 3/4 inch PVC is what I used out there. Maybe even a half. It wasn't much bigger than the
okay.
The
and rebar. You attached that to the 4x4s on the trellis.
Yes. Okay. I attached that and just used zip ties and some blocks of wood to stable, to give it some space. But stabilize it so it was strong. Okay. I just didn't want the sunflower right up against the wood. Just, I didn't want to do it. I know there's growers that will build specific, almost like
scaffolding.
Scaffolding. Yes. Thank you. They'll either build full out scaffolding or they'll build something similar to scaffolding out of, wood, and they have more of a permanent type structure. And that, honestly, I may try that someday if I start to get into the 25 plus. That's
a very expensive venture.
It is. And most places don't pay for sunflowers. I happen to run a way off here in Minnesota where I pay for the top 3 spots for tallest sunflower, the top 3 spots for widest head sunflower, which is pretty cool. I wish more way off sites would jump into that, but
I'm coming to your way offs.
Right. Hey, I pay the top 3 for butternut squash too.
I'm definitely coming to your way off,
which is pretty cool. I've always looked at it like the pumpkins draw the crowds. They're the most work, but everybody else works just as hard with their, with all their other veggies. They should get a nice little award and some money for it.
They should be recognized as well.
If nothing else, to cover some gas to comes,
exactly.
Have a fun day with all the other growers. So.
Exactly.
But yeah, sunflowers, like I said, sunflowers and tomatoes are a simple, small space giant that anybody can grow anywhere. You don't need a farm. You don't need a hobby farm. You don't even need an acre to grow it. You can do it right as long as you have some good sun. That's probably key. If you live in the middle of a forest, it may be a bit tough. But if you got some good sun, you can grow this. That bush that drives you crazy every year. Dig it out, put in a little 4x4 foot garden, and grow yourself a beautiful sunflower or an awesome tomato plant.
And maybe just a couple honorable mentions in this, since we're talking about tight spaces and growing, and because a lot of times you see people who excel well in tomatoes and sunflowers are those who don't have room for the bigger stuff, right? And so since we're kind of mentioning those, some honorable mentions would be eggplant. That's a great one to grow. I think me and you both hold our state records for eggplant.
Yeah. And we had a new national record just this last year out of Iowa at pushing up towards 6 pounds. It was like 5.5 pounds, which is
5.28.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. So that's a fun one. That's another one that is fun. And honestly, because of the state record thing I'm going to do, it's wide open in all these states and provinces and
Yep.
countries. Get your
Yep.
state record eggplants in. It's easy and fun to grow a big one. And I'll tell you one thing, it almost identical to tomato. You're
Yep.
going to do the look for the biggest bud, and if you need help with it, let me know. I'll show you how to do it. And then you're going to prune like you've never pruned before, just like the tomato. Every ounce of new growth is going to come off, and you'll grow that big eggplant.
Yep. And it's fun because when you get a 4-pound eggplant, that was the first one I got this year. And I mean, here's the thing: I didn't know. See, I got some seeds, but I didn't know. Like, I also bought extras, so I bought the Aswad seeds, right, which look identical to the seeds that I'd gotten from you and stuff as far as what they are. But the seeds that I got from you and the seeds that you had gotten, those are what they call the new improved New York Monster. Okay. Well, they look identical to the Aswad, ASWAD. And so I bought those. Well, my state record come from an Aswad.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
but the problem with
good.
that is the New York Monster is a denser fruit than the Aswad. So if I would have had an Aswad the same size as that one, I would have had, yeah. So I had a really good one. It'd have been over 5 pounds. So I mean, but that's all right. You know what I mean?
So that may be where you maybe want to try to pollinate the two. Get
Right.
that bigger size with the denser fruit,
Right. And I may try that this year because I got both set of seeds still. Because I grew a couple 3-pounders, another one at 4-pound, but then that one was a 4 pound, 7.2 ounces for the state record. So I've got seeds from all those, and I can play around with them this year, and it would be a lot of fun to do. And then I've got seeds from a giant green eggplant that gets bigger in size than the Aswad or the new improved New York Monster. So that would also be fun. But those are just little old, how me and you are. We're kind of like mad scientists.
But
another really fun one that people don't know about is giant chili peppers. I grew a 10.7 ounce giant chili pepper this past year, and that's a lot of fun too. And again, it's like the tomato. It's like the eggplant. You can grow it in a tight space. You can have a lot of fun with it. And you can also, not just chili peppers, but you can grow the big bell peppers. And I think you've grown those.
Yep. I've gotten them up near a pound, it's incredible when you're holding, a pepper that's like this big. It's just
right.
If you could just get that thing dense, the thing would weigh probably 3 pounds. But
man,
how peppers are they're so hollow. But
they are.
Yeah, a fun one. And then in addition to that, all the root crops. Think of all these root crops you can grow in a little 2-3 by 3 foot spot.
Yep.
I mean, you go on. There's so many giants that you can grow in small spaces that you should never ever feel like you can't get into the giant growing world because you can't grow a pumpkin or a squash or a watermelon.
It's fun. And I'll be honest with you, I get more excited over my root crops now since I started growing them last year than I do about the giant pumpkins. I mean, giant pumpkins. Okay, they're pretty and they're fun to watch go, 50 pounds in a day. But that root crop, I don't know what's under that dirt.
Yep.
So when I see it start to swell up out of the dirt, I'm excited for what I can't see under the dirt. And that just creates a whole different excitement and thrill to the game. And when you go to dig, when I dug my state record carrot out and I'm sitting there and I'm digging, I was like, oh, honey, I got the video up. You check on YouTube and I'm keep digging and digging and digging. I'm like, I'm touching the bottom of the trash can and my fingers are touching the root, and I'm like, this is crazy, It's fun. It's a lot of fun. And a lot of people, I really think if we can get the word out, we can keep building this community, keep introducing new people into it and have open arms with, and just welcoming in and be able to help teach them and guide them and answer their questions and stuff. I really think the giant growing community could explode exponentially within the next, 3 to 5 years. We could see a really big movement in the giant growing community and people having love and passion for not just gardening, but extreme gardening to the point that, we can provide food, here's what people don't understand. I get a lot of people say you're wasting food. No, I can eat everything that I grow. Everything I grow, I can literally eat. I choose not to eat it because I like looking at how big it got, but I can eat all of it. And a lot of times it'd be more than what I could eat, right? But you can't eat it. But here's the thing, what that taught me, what that one specific thing taught me is how to grow actually my actual garden that much better.
Yep.
So that the food I do choose to eat, I'm that much better at growing it and raising it. So
Well,
and I think a lot of people miss
and
that.
I tell people that growing giants is a life skill. It's a survival skill, because now you've learned that it's more than just putting a seed in the ground. If you can grow a giant, you can now grow your produce at incredible yields. You have now understood the soil science part of it, that it's a living ecosystem down there. And by feeding the soil and keeping it happy and healthy, you're actually feeding the plants. And before I ever got into giants, if I spent 3 hours a week in my garden, that was like a lot. And now it's like 3 hours a day, it feels like. And just I think you become so much more in tune to nature. And if you're growing giants, because you got to know everything from that little soil microbe, all the way up to the weather that's going on, and you're out there enjoying nature and not stuck on a screen or in an office. I mean, there is nothing. I will argue with anybody any day that growing giants is perhaps one of the best things you could ever do with your life. So
I think so. And here's the other part. It opens our minds up to try things that we may not have ever tried before. Before last year, there was never a person that took a going down pumpkin, all right, like I had, that the vine was going down, graft the tertiary to that pumpkin, and get the pumpkin to start growing again and thriving. And so many people were like, how did you think of that? What made you? I was just standing there in the garden and I was looking at it and I seen a tertiary growing towards the pumpkin and I said, I missed one, I should have got that. And I was like, hang on a minute. That tertiary is alive. My vine is dying on the main where this plant's hooked up. What stops me from grafting that together? And you try new things, things that you would not have tried in a normal garden setting. You would have cut that pumpkin off, carried it out, and been done with it.
Yep.
But in a giant growing setting, you try things to keep things alive for whatever reason you may have, whether it's for the competition or just to, try different things. You try those and you learn something that nobody else knew, right? Or if they did know it, you don't see anything out about it, right? And so I think that's where the giant growing really helps to cultivate everybody, all the other growers, right? Even if they're not giant growers, just gardeners, backyard gardeners, market gardeners, farmers. There's farmers around here that actually grow big farms that stop by out here and talk to me about growing. They're wanting to know what I use, how I do it, whatever, right? And so I take that as a compliment, and because they've been growing longer than I have. I should be asking them, you know what I mean? But they see stuff and they're like, hang on a minute, this doesn't make sense to me in my head from everything that I know about plants and this, that, and the other. And they're able to glean from me, and I can glean from them too, because it's not that they're lacking knowledge. They just don't have the same knowledge I have, and I don't have their knowledge. So we can trade those back and forth. And that's what's so great about all this. This Where to Begin Homestead says, they're curious, does the flowers differ from giant veggies, or do you eat them? Or how the flavors differ? Yeah.
So when you grow a true giant veggie and you're putting everything into it, remember, a lot of these veggies are there. I always like to tell people pumpkins are 90% water and 10% magic. And the magic with the water makes something that can be 2,000 pounds. But when you get so much water into a product, into a plant, or into a fruit, it will dull the taste down a bit. So a lot of these giant fruits, especially if they're grown to an extreme size, will taste will have less flavor to them because they're so watered down.
Right.
But you know what? The watermelon, if you've ever tried the watermelon, up to about 100 pounds, they're just absolutely amazing.
Right.
Heck, I even had 132 pounder, and it was really, really good. It didn't have that overwatered taste yet. Butternut squash, my butternuts were amazing, even at 50
Yep.
pounds. So it's going to be less flavorful, but if you're really going to use it as food, what you do is you take the genetics of these giants and you just get a bunch of bigger than normal fruit.
Right.
For instance, butternut. You could probably get 10 butternuts off of a plant that are 25 pounds. That's
Yep.
bigger than any butternut you're going to find, and they're
That's
all
right.
going to have great flavor. So the genetics part of this is increasing the size and the productivity. And if you don't go for the extreme size, you're going to keep that flavor. Now, obviously, in every category, they always breed something to have the best flavor.
Right.
In tomatoes, there's the best flavor one. In the watermelons, there's the sweetest one. So every category, they do breed some that have even just a little bit better flavor than the rest. So, we're not breeding for flavor, or we're not, competing for flavor, or else we would be doing that.
Right.
We are simply competing for size. Everything is edible. It may not taste the best because a lot of our produce, because we grow it to an extreme size, is a little waterlogged, you could probably call it.
And maybe also one little caveat to that is, depending on what you may use on that plant, you may not want to eat it. Like
Correct.
if you use
Yes.
imidacloprid WSP 75, or if you use Eagle 20, something like that, you don't want to eat it.
If you're doing some systemic fungicides or pesticides, you wouldn't want to. Now one little thing, I didn't even say this earlier. I grew my tomato 100% organic in that 41 days.
That's what Dan was telling me.
I never used an insecticide. I never used a fungicide. So I could have just went out in the garden and just started chowing down on it. But obviously I figured the seeds were valuable. So
right.
I picked through it and took out every seed I could. So
Dan told me, I posted about my winter grow. Now, I'll be honest with you. I think I pretty much got the corn in the bag. I got about a 7-8 foot tall corn in there.
Nice.
So I think we got the corn in the bag. I'm really close to you in that daggone cabbage. But I cannot get my tomato to do anything. So me and Dan were talking, and I said, "Hey, Dan, I don't know what's going on here," because right before his mega bloom had went down, and so he starts talking to me, and we would start messaging back and forth, and he said, you need to grow 100% organic, because that's how I'm getting these things. That's how I'm getting these giants. And I'm like, that's just incredible. Like, you hear this stuff and people doubt it. People doubt, using myco and azos. They doubt broad forking. They doubt no tilling and this, that, and the other. And that's okay to have your doubts, because I have them too. But the more that I grow, the more I see these growers growing in using certain things like extreme, using no-till, using broad forks and these things. And I see the productivity that they're having. And let's just say Dan Sutherland grew a 16.99 pound tomato organic. He grew a 13 pound one too. And then I think there was another one in there that was like 13 something pounds or 14.
Yep.
That is incredible. And he grew it all organic with no pesticides, no fungicides, none of that. That speaks to the soil and the symbiotic relationship between the soil and the roots, the plant health, and the performance of the plant growing a giant fruit. Yeah.
Yep. And honestly, I believe that if you play around and you get good genetics and your soil is tuned in 100%, that soil has the potential to completely unlock the genetic potential of that seed or that plant. And, as we've watched over the years, the genetic potential keeps going up because we are doing a really good job of breeding these things. And we're breeding them in a way where we can keep pushing that bar further than anybody ever thought possible. I mean, that 7-pounder, the 7.7, whatever, that one sat around as the world record for like 20 years up until Dan broke it. And nobody really ever thought, they thought it was some freak of nature. Nobody can grow a 7-pound tomato. Are you kidding me?
Right.
And then once Dan broke that, and once those genetics started to get moved around the world, it started falling. The records did, and the pumpkins. You can look back at that. What was the first? You go back to 1983, and the world record pumpkin was 470 pounds. And people were like, are we ever going to get over 500? Because at the World Fair in 1900, the World Fair, William Warnock brought a pumpkin that weighed 400 pounds. Biggest pumpkin ever in history. World record in 1900. That means we went from 1900 to 1983. That's 83 years, and we only moved up 70 pounds.
Right.
When people started talking technique, sharing seeds, the genetics, we started close pollinating. What happened? In what was it? 1996, the first 1,000-pound pumpkin ever hit. Nobody thought that was even possible. Then they started saying, could we hit 2,000? No, nobody. We're never going to see a 2,000-pound pumpkin. Well, what happened in 2012? A 2,009-pound pumpkin hit the scale. Ron Wallace, grew it.
Right.
Unbelievable. Changed the world. And then we started thinking, 3,000?
Right.
No.
We almost had it.
Everybody said, no way, 3,000. We've hit the limit. They're too big. They'll cave in on themselves. They can't grow that fast. There's not enough days.
Right.
And what happened over Ian and Stewie over in the UK? 2,900 pounds, and they had probably at least 3 or 4 weeks left of growing. It would have easily been the first 3,000-pound pumpkins. So what we do in this is why I think we're in the golden era of growing giants, because we are still in that upward motion. We are still pushing that envelope, pushing the bar, and anybody can do it. That's what's so exciting about it. So
exactly. It gets me excited. I'm ready for, can we wake up tomorrow, snap our hands, all your snow be gone, we get warm weather and start,
I'd get out there and start gardening.
Yeah, I'm ready for it, man. I'm absolutely ready for it. So let's just let's see. What are you going to do this year? What are your plans for this year? I know you just moved into your new spot. Yep. What are your plans? What are you going to grow? What are you not going to grow?
So my initial plans, and they could change. It is only
January.
February 1st, last day of January. But right now I'm looking at 3 Atlantic giant pumpkins, 1 green squash, which is an AG still. And then I'm going to do 2 watermelon. I'm going to do, I have some onions and some giant carrots growing, so I'm going to do a few root crops. I'll do the cabbage. I got some cabbage seeds. So I'll do a bunch of those smaller, fun side,
right.
The fun giants, I like to call them, the ones that don't take every ounce of your life to make it work. And then I'm going to put up a trellis, probably grow 2 long gourds. And then I'm going to do a lot of tall sunflowers. I got a nice area where I'm going to do my wide head sunflowers. And then I'm on 11 acres now. So I'm going to go way far away.
Right.
Where there's no cross pollination, or at least the low chances possible. And
right.
I'm going to do some tall sunflowers up against my long gourd trellis. And then I'm going to give the field pumpkin. I'm going to try a giant field pumpkin, and then I'm going to go for my butternut. I'm going to grow my butternut squash.
There you go. My
world record since, another cool thing. I don't know. I mean, you probably know this because you follow it more, but the butternut squash, the 55.5 or the 65.1, they're both grown on the same plant when I got that world record. But world record since has come from those seeds, which is pretty cool. It has set up a really, really cool lineage that is going to be hard to beat with another one. But
Yep.
every world record. So it'll be very interesting this year with more people growing butternuts probably than ever before, to see how many 100-pounders, and maybe even see if we can't, you know what? It's like the pumpkin game, only in the beginning. Maybe we can hit 150. Maybe we can hit 200. Maybe it'll go to 500. You never know, because
I want
they're
you to,
so good at pushing these things.
I want you to think about this. My butternut, still to date, it's not the biggest that was ever grown, but still to date, it was the fastest ever grown.
Yep.
If that would have grown for the time that it would have had, it would have been in excess of 120 pounds. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think,
which is why I think we know nothing about these as far as what their potential is.
Right. And, it gets me excited, but I want to know, how does it feel to be the grandfather of the butternut squash?
It's it's interesting, because that every big butternut out there has come from the seeds that I produced out of those first two, and it's just, it's cool. You know what? I'm always one looking for the next big giant, and for me to be able to grow something that, and let's be honest, a butternut is easy to grow. It's fun to grow. It's easy to get to ripen right at way off time. It's it's a very, very fun giant that mine personally had zero disease pressure, had zero fungus pressure. I mean, it literally was growing out into my AG plant, and my AG plant had powdery mildew everywhere. And this thing was like growing around it like, you're not going to do anything to me.
And I've even thought about grafting that into a field pumpkin.
You know what? It might be a good graft for some different, maybe even a northern watermelon. I mean, it's really cool to know that I was able to find a veggie seed or a fruit seed that had the potential to get to a size that very few fruits out there ever get to. I mean, when you're talking 100 pounds, it goes down to very few fruits that ever hit that 100-pound level. And you know what? Selective breeding, the way we do our breeding is I think second to none in the breeding industry. And we do it to push size, and we prove it every year that the size can just keep getting bigger on all these giants, which is so incredible and so cool to think about. So it really humbles me. I'm extremely happy when I see a big butternut growing out there. It really tickles me. I love it. I love the butternut as a heck. I loved it before. It's great eating, but to get something that is like I always will tell people, sometimes I feel like what we like to do as giant growers is blur that line of fantasy and reality, growing stuff bigger than life, like you're on some strange planet or some weird dream, and that's so cool. When it's something that you were able to be a part of, directly or indirectly, but I equate it to, when you help bring in a 40-pound northern, you got to, be a part of it. And when people take these seeds and grow them into these monsters, I feel like I'm a part of that. So it's cool. I love it. I love everything there is to do with giant growing, which is why I do everything I do. So.
Right. So, I guess, is there anything else that you can think of that you want to reiterate, or maybe you might not have said that, or you think we're pretty good on that?
Yeah, I think if you guys listen to what I said, I think you'll have incredible success. Obviously, if you're a new grower out there, or a grower that's just done it a year or two, get with one of us. Feel free to text me or message me. There's people that do it every day, and I'm totally fine with helping out anybody. My goal is to get you to grow your biggest possible fruit or veggie, because at the end of the day, you're going to be so happy, excited. You're going to have that fulfillment that you took that little teeny seed and you turned it into something so incredibly amazing that most people around, when they see it, they're going to think that you put nuclear waste on it, or, gallons.
They're going to ask, is that real?
No.
I mean, every question.
I mean, they'll say that. They'll say, how, you had to have done something. And it's just, it's such a cool feeling to know that you accomplished that. There's so many things in life that we can't accomplish. We try, and we just always feel like we're at the end of, the bad end of it. And
Right.
It's something where you can go out and with some simple technique, if you're listening and you feel like you have a brown thumb, talk to one of us. Talk to one of us that have grown. Get on, like
Garden of Giants.
Yeah, Garden of Giants. We're all there to help you succeed. Trust me, I want to see nothing more than every single person. If you like pumpkins, I want you to grow 1,000-pound pumpkin. It is very possible for every person to do it. It may be a challenge in the southern states, but if you can get a 500-pounder, that's amazing. And to just that, I'm telling you, the fulfillment and excitement that you will have at the end of that season when you get to bring your fruit. Yeah, you're addicted, because it's so incredible and so fun. So I just encourage everybody out there, if you're kicking the tires of giant growing, if you're just wondering about it, get involved, get a sunflower seed, get a tomato seed, try something small first if you want to do it that way. So you're not so overwhelmed. If you want to go for a giant pumpkin, ask us. I've only been growing 5 years, 5 of the 6 years. I didn't grow last year, but I've grown 13 pumpkins over 1,000 pounds. And if you think about it, first time I grew 1,000-pound pumpkin, when you do the math, 0.00000000001% of the world has ever grown 1,000-pound pumpkin. So you're doing something, even though it's only 1,000 pounds. That you never want to get caught up into these 2,500-pound growers.
Right.
Growing 1,000-pound pumpkin is something that nobody on this planet does. I mean, the percentages are not even mathematical. So it's an incredible accomplishment to hit 1,000 pounds, and in the South to hit 500 pounds, amazing, absolutely amazing. So,
it's a lot of fun.
Just connect with some growers that are currently growing, and they will. I mean, most of them are willing to help you. And if they're not, find one that is, because
that's right.
There's enough of us type out there.
Yep, there is. There's enough of us.
I would love to see you do good. And you know what? Even if you come to our way offs and beat us, I don't mind that, because I know that I get a little bit of an assist, from the help of, it actually, when somebody beats me at a way off, especially somebody I've helped, I like that more than winning, because I've won. I have won. I have gone all the way to the top. I have a Guinness record. I don't need that anymore. I want to see other people have that same fulfillment, that same joy. So,
that's what it's about.
Yep, it is.
And it's a lot of fun doing it. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. You can stay on for just a little bit. I'm going to end this. You'll stay on, me and we'll finish up, wrap up our deal and stuff. But, guys, that's all we have. Again, if you want to know more, go over to Garden of Giants on Facebook. You can check them out there. There's tons of people, like he said, that will help you out. You guys can see all the different giants that are grown: cantaloupes, watermelons, pumpkins, field pumpkins, butternut squash, onions, you name it, it's there. Okay. Also, there's other groups. If more specific groups, Garden of Giants is for all of us. There's more specific groups. So if you only want to grow giant watermelons, there's GWG that you can go to. There's giant pumpkin groups only that you can go to. So you can go to all these other ones and check them all out and have fun with it. But we encourage you to grow. If you're not growing, we encourage you to reach out to us and grow. But that's going to end for tonight's episode. We appreciate each and every one of y'all coming in and joining us for 2 hours and 15 minutes almost. It's been the longest live feed so far, and it's probably been the best, in terms of knowledge being taken up for a specific thing, right? So, I mean, it's been really, really good conversation. I've enjoyed it because we've covered such a wide variety of topics, and we've been able to answer several questions. So very thankful for that. Thanks for Chris for coming on and helping me do this, and for actually taking on the extra topic of sunflower, because I didn't want to overwhelm him with 2 topics. And he said, hey, I'll do it anyhow. And so that's just the kind of guy he is. He's a great guy. So thank him very much for doing that. But we're going to get out of here. We got some upcoming dates for you. Let's see, next on the 7th, next Tuesday, we have Lazy Dog Farm coming on. Travis Key, he'll be on the 13th. We have Mark Morales from the GPC coming on. On the 21st, we have my secretary, I think Aaron Ferrer. He's the a veteran and inventor of the Ant, the apparatus for navigating tarps. He'll be coming on. You guys have seen me use that. Then on the 28th of February, we have Travis Ginger coming on. We're going to talk about how to get a 2,500 pound pumpkin. And then we'll be continuing on March 7th with my buddy Ben from Petra Tools. And if you want to come on and you got some knowledge and you want to come on, you want to share it with us, don't have to be just about giant pumpkins. It can be about homesteading or just gardening. We'd love to have you on. So go on ahead and contact me at babydrill2119@yahoo.com, and we'll get you set up and scheduled for a date. Other than that, guys, we've got some other exciting episodes coming on. I got extreme gardening video that I'm working on editing. I'll probably try to get that put up tonight, and you'll be able to check it tomorrow. So, guys, we appreciate you watching, and we'll see you tomorrow right here in the hollers and hills of West Virginia. See y'all, guys.